Hello and welcome to this screencast on Eduonix. My name is Ilya and today we are going to talk about testing third-party services with Minitest and VCR. So in the previous video of this series we were talking about setting up and using Minitest in Rails 5 application. So we have set up Minitest, we have written some tests, but now the question is what should we do if we would like to test some third-party API. So, for example, suppose we'd like to get weather information in our application and we'd like to test this API somehow. And there are some problems that arise. First of all, the API are usually quite slow. So when I send a request to the API, it may take like maybe 5 or 10 seconds for a response to arrive, and that would mean that our tests are going to become much slower. The second problem is that the API may have some quota limitations, and so if I run the same test over and over again, the quota may be depleted eventually. And also, if I don't have an internet access for some reason and I try to test this API, then basically I will have some problems because I will not be able to communicate with the API at all. But luckily all those problems can be solved quite easily with the help of a solution called VCR. And VCR is a Ruby gem that allows you to record and then replay HTTP interactions. So basically, the first time when you perform a request to the API, VCR records the response from the API, stores it in some file, in a YAML file to be precise, and then you can use this YAML file and just utilize the response from there without the need to perform the same request over and over again. So in this video we will see VCR in action. First of all, you will need to sign up for this Open Weather Map API. It is free, so you should just sign up. I already have an account, so I'm going to sign in. Then you should navigate to the API keys section. So there you should see your API key. It may take up to 10 minutes for this key to become active, and do not publicly expose this key. So I will of course make this key invalid after this recording, and so never ever expose your own key in GitHub maybe, or anywhere else. So to protect our key, we can utilize environment variables. And to easily load those variables, we can utilize a gem called .env. So we can simply copy this line of code and go to our gem file and place .env under development and test groups. Then simply say bundle update or bundle install, and after that create a file env with a leading dot and simply copy this key here. Copy this key and say, for example, open weather key, something like that, and place it here. After that, we should add this file to gitignore so that this file is not tracked by Git. And that's pretty much it. Now I think we can go ahead and create a very simple wrapper for the API so that later we can interact with API quite easily. So I'm going to create a services directory and weather API file inside. So I'm going to say weather API. That's going to be a very simple Ruby class. It is not going to be inherited from any other class, I think. Inside we're going to have an initialize function, or sorry, initialize method, obviously. It is going to accept a query. So this query is going to say where do we want what location do we want to use to display weather information. So basically Open Weather Map has lots of API endpoints, and we will use this current weather data. So the current weather data obviously displays information about the current weather in some location. And so the call will look like this. So we're going to say display the weather for the given city and for the given country. So quite simple, basically. Inside we would like to instantiate this to define this instance variable, and of course we will require some methods to create a URI and then to parse the request. These methods will look like this. So the first one is get and parse some URI. So we are going to use JSON to parse the request, and the request will be sent by net HTTP library. And so the request URI itself will be returned by this method. So it says API openweathermap.org. Then we are providing the query. Then we are providing our key that is being taken from our environment, and also I am saying that units are metric, so that the temperature is in Celsius, for example, not in Kelvin or Fahrenheit or anything like that. So also let's, by the way, define an instance variable for query, and as for the data, let's simply say get and parse our request URI, something like that. Also, I'd like to create two interface methods to easily fetch the temperature and weather condition in a given location. I think let me simply paste those two methods. So we're taking the temperature and other weather conditions from the response. Also, I think we can take advantage of caching here, because weather conditions do not change that often, so I think we can cache them. And for that, I'm going to utilize a low-level Rails caching using a Rails cache fetch method. So replace this line of code with the following code. So here we are fetching a cache under the following key, and it is going to expire in 12 hours, for example. Okay, don't forget that in development, by default, we are not performing any caching at all. So this piece of code here checks if this file exists. So if it does exist, then we wish to perform caching in development. Therefore, let's create this file manually, like this. Okay. So now I think we can display some information about the weather by utilizing our weather API. I'm going to say, for example, Moscow, Russia, like this. You can use any other query. And now let's proceed to our index.html.erb file and place some markup here. So the markup is going to be quite trivial. We are displaying the temperature in Celsius, and also we are displaying weather conditions. So this method may return and actually will return an array. So we are iterating over this array and displaying the name of the condition and its description. So for example, here we can say something like rainy, maybe, or something like that. Okay, so now we can go ahead and integrate VCR into our application. So I'm going to say gem VCR, and also I'm going to say gem webmock. So webmock is a special gem for stopping, to perform stopping. So here is the list of all supporting HTTP stubbing facilities. So I'm going to use webmock, but you can stick with some other gem basically. Alright, so now go ahead and say bundle install. And next let's go to our test directory, create support inside, and then VCR.rb file. It is going to contain a configuration for VCR. I'm going to paste the config here, so this option here explains where the files generated by VCR should reside, so I'm going to create this directory right away. Cassettes is just a fancy name for VCR files that contain the recorded HTTP interactions. So next we are saying that we would like to use the mock. Next we are saying that the localhost requests should be ignored by VCR. Next we are saying that if no cassette is specified for some third-party HTTP request, then the test should fail right away. And this line here says that our API key should not be recorded. So basically this key will be replaced by this string here, because after all this key is sensitive data, so I do not want this key to be present in our cassettes, basically. Alright, so next, of course, we need to load all the data, all the files, all the folders from the support directory. So place the following line of code, and yeah, also by the way, VCR has an official page with all the documentation where you can find information about other configuration options and some other examples, so feel free to browse the docs, of course. Okay, so now that everything is ready, we can start writing our tests. So I'm going to create a services directory, and then inside weather API test.rb. So let me simply copy this stuff here, place it here, and replace it with weather API test. So here I'd like to set some assertions, but first of all I'm going to define a setup method, and inside I'm going to say VCR use cassette. And for example, I'm going to give it a name, Moscow weather, for instance. It is going to accept a block of code, and inside we are going to say weather equals to weather API. Basically, we can copy this line of code. To put things simple, we can copy this line of code, and what it is going to do, it is going to record this HTTP interaction. So because we have wrapped it with use cassette method, this request will be recorded by VCR and stored inside the VCR cassettes directory. And now, of course, we can of course set some assertions here. So I think let me just place the corresponding assertions. So we're checking that the temperature has some value, and weather conditions, well, also has some value as well. Alright, now, so those values are quite arbitrary for now, because I'm not sure what the API is going to return for us. so the tests will most likely fail. For now, I'm going to say Rails test, and note that it will take quite significant amount of time to complete. Why? Because we are performing the actual API request the first time, because, well, a VCR should firstly record something, and only then we can utilize the recorded data. So yeah, as you see, it fails because the temperature is quite different currently in Moscow. Let's go ahead and see what's inside the VCR cassettes directory. So here we see that Moscow weather.yaml file was generated, and it contains all the information about the request. And note by the way that the key was indeed replaced by the string. So the key was filtered out as we've specified here. Okay, so now let's scroll down, and here is the actual response. So here is the string of the response, and it says that the weather is rainy, so it says rain, and the description is light intensity shower rain. So it perfectly matches this string here, because it is indeed quite rainy at the moment. Next, speaking about the temperature, here is this value. So it says 775 Celsius. So it's quite chilly actually. So let's replace 8 with this value. And so also note that it took nearly 8 seconds to complete, which is quite slow actually. Now let's run the same test again, and note that it took less than a second. Why? Because now we are not performing any HTTP requests at all. We are using this file here, this cassette here, without performing any HTTP request at all. So that's how basically VCR works. Before wrapping up, let's also write a very simple system test to make sure that this markup is displayed properly on the root page. So let's go to the posts test file that was created in the previous video and paste the following testing example. So once again we are using the same cassette because basically the request, the query is the same. So well, of course, ideally we would need to determine the user location somehow. Maybe the user should enter his location upon registration, but we don't have any registration at the moment. So this query is simply hard-coded here. So anyways, I'm a bit lost, sorry. So here is our cassette, and next we are visiting this post's URL, and then we are saying within. So within is a method provided by Capybara. It simply scoops some actions to this element on the page. So this element, it's an ID, basically. It corresponds to this element. So we are explaining that the following text should be found right inside this element, not anywhere on the page, only inside this element. So the temperature should be actually 775. And that's pretty much it. So this way we have written our system test that also utilizes a VCR cassette. So as you see, nothing complex about using VCR with your tests, and as you see, it has finished in like 5 seconds. Well, that's quite explainable because system tests are much slower than other types of tests, but still, well, everything works as expected, and we are indeed using our VCR cassette in this case. So well, that's pretty much it. In this video we have seen VCR in action, and by the way, don't forget that all the source code for this video can be found under Eduonix screencasts repo inside this Minitest directory, so feel free to utilize this code as you see fit. Don't hesitate to post your questions. I thank you for staying with me and see you really soon.